Well, when I heard about the book, it sounded like it was going to be unpleasant to read, but like I should read it if it is true, because I feel like if something's really unpleasant but true, why shouldn't I read it? Because some people had to experience it. And when I started to read it, I kind of started to regret committing to reading the book because it's really ugly.
My first impression of the story was a lot of complete doubt, and because it's such this fringe kind of topic and this really heavy CIA sex slave sort of thing. It was very non-believable and hard to believe.
I got the book, started reading it that night, and it was an interesting experience. At first I didn't know how to feel about it. I was oh, this can't be true, or should I even be reading this kind of thing? And, letting these kinds of thoughts and actions into my head, is that safe? Gross at first, scary at times.
Obviously when you first hear it through word of mouth, there's a certain sense of disbelief and, doubt. So, no question, doubt was one of the first things that came to my mind.
What kind of frightened me most about the book was because it was it was so dense with disturbing things that I almost felt as the more that I read it, I was becoming a little bit more desensitized to the whole thing, and that was a little bit frightening.
First of all, I want to thank all of you guys for coming, and this is a great thing for me because I think the goal of this is to interface between Mark and Cathy and people who normally wouldn't attend one of their conferences or who wouldn't get a chance to otherwise meet them. One of the things about the book is that it's very alienating for a lot of people, and it's also outside of the realm of most people's understanding what the world is. And so the idea and intention of the film is to, in some ways, again, make a meeting of the minds or a meeting of the paradigms, if you will. So you've all had a chance to meet Mark and Cathy, but please, I know if you have hard questions and, you need to ask them, not just for yourselves, but for them, because I think that we won't do justice to this process unless, they're asked questions that challenge, what you may or may not be able to accept about the book.
When I was first told of your story, this is before reading the book, the first thought that came to my mind is, if this is true, how are you here to tell this story and you're still alive?
Well, first of all, we have a First Amendment right to express that which we've experienced. The reason I believe we're still alive is a rather complex one. Well, the answer is, to be perfectly candid with you, I had a lot of help from people working within the intelligence community, law enforcement, federal, state, as well as some direction even from some congressmen. That's why we're still alive.
The term handler, I guess this is more directed to both of you. As a handler, this person who, or individual or half demon sort of person, would inflict control upon your life. Who is controlling them?
The handlers that I had were associated with the CIA, but most of all, my owner in MK Ultra Mind Control was U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd. And Senator Byrd directed my activities. He's the one who decided who my handlers would be. And he chose different handlers for certain purposes. My first handler, for example, was for trauma. My second handler was primarily for being able to travel throughout the United States and the Caribbean and Mexico, Canada, and the country music industry. So he chose them according to what they could provide. And as a handler, they followed Senator Byrd's orders, but they were already still associated with the CIA.
This is jumping to a totally different subject, but something that wasn't clear to me in the book was your public image and Kelly's public image.
I'm not real sure on how Kelly would have been perceived, except that she traveled the country music circuit and was exposed to a lot of people rather than going to school like a normal child. And in my case, my public image was one of someone that was also around the country music industry that was probably some kind of an airhead. And people didn't even bother to talk to me for very long. My answers were like, praise the Lord, with a smile, to pretty much everything, which would it just went nowhere. There's no depth. There was nothing that could even lead into a conversation, so they never would, people wouldn't talk to me any further anyway. They just figured I was just pretty spacey.
It's very apparent to me that you guys have a very close relationship and trust for one another and respect for one another. However, to play devil's advocate, what can you tell me to convince me that you're not her handler now, or you're not using some form of mind control right now in terms of your ability to use hypnotism and your connection still with CIA operatives or people in the know?
The easiest way to tell is that we have perceptual differences, and if she were under my control, her perceptions would be my perceptions. A handler says, I'll give you a piece of my mind. And in this case, I gave her mind back. In the very beginning, when I would see her mirroring and matching my cliches or my body language or anything else, that was quite a task for me to change these autogenic response systems within myself to what I had seen her exhibit that seemed to be hers. And I was having to mirror and match her original thoughts. And that's enough to drive you nuts after a while. I was so thankful when she fused together and she was her own person. And I'll never forget the day as long as I live.
Just for the past couple of minutes, I've been having waves of sadness and panic because I'm starting to believe your story. You know, I think I believe it now, and it just kind of affects me because if it's true, like, what are we supposed to do? You know, like, what would you like us to do to? Sorry, but it's so horrible to know that it could have really happened to you. And what do we do? Like, where do we go? You know, what would you like us to do leaving here now?
All we can do is raise awareness, ultimately, and knowledge is our only defense against it. So we just let other people know, and it's just going to take a whole, I think, a whole evolutionary process of humanity to stop it from happening to someone else again. Because for now, it's still ongoing, and there's more children every day that are being thrust into it, and it has got to stop.
Actually, I was having a similar thought before she said it. I want to say, just I think that's what I will take away from it is just her eyes, just the. Here's my moment. No, just the peace that I see within her.
Yeah, I was really agree. Let me ask, what would you, that piece, like, is it something that you think is uncommon, or think it's only compared to what you read? You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, and compared to what I read, I mean, I can't begin to tell you the things I imagine in her dealing with it, or picking up those pieces, or, I mean, obviously she didn't know, but just the kind of person that I would be meeting and those preconceptions. So, just, I was completely thrown for a loop, but in a really wonderful way.
It was very real. It was very intense. These two people seemed to be extremely coherent and have not only their story together, but their minds together as well. And it's an extremely validating experience to have them say these things to your face.
So it kind of makes me a little pissed, and also it's going to be a little hard knowing this story exists and when the right time is to bring it up. Because holding this story back from the public is a crime in itself. So I want to spread the word, but again, you have to be careful where and when and who you tell this to, if you're going to have the time to back it up and let her sit in there.
Mm-hmm. I really was already pretty much a ready believer in that sense. So this really more just confirmed it and allowed me to feel some more of that truth.
Cool.
Well, when I first started reading the book, people noticed that I was acting a little different. Like, what's the matter with you? Because I was preoccupied. I think I was sort of shocked that I had read that, and the one protective shield that I had was the layer of doubt. And I think that's how we function in general in society. Is like you watch this horrible news story in Bosnia, and you're kind of like, you know, like don't really want to deal with it. And so I had this wave of panic where I was like, oh my God, I believe this, and it just changes everything. You know, I don't really know what to do, and I don't really want to be alone tonight. Like, it's just one of those things where, okay, so I've had this earth-shattering experience. Well, when I heard about the book, it sounded like it was going to be unpleasant to read, but like I should read it if it is true, because I feel like
a lot of complete doubt, and because it's such this fringe kind of topic, and this really heavy CIA sex slave sort of thing. It was very not believable and hard to believe.
Something's really unpleasant but true. Why shouldn't I read it? Because some people had to experience it. And when I started to read it, I kind of started to regret committing to reading the book because it's really ugly.
My first impression of the story was
Gross at first, scary at times.
Obviously when you first hear it through word of mouth, there's a certain sense of disbelief and, doubt. So, no.
I got the book, started reading it that night, and it was an interesting experience. At first, I didn't know how to feel about it. I was, oh, this can't be true, or should I even be reading this kind of thing? And, letting these kinds of thoughts and actions into my head, is that safe?